Egypt Games, Chapter 9. Summoned by the mighty ones. Right up until a few days before the end of the month, it really looked as if Halloween was going to be completely wasted. Of course, there was going to be a program at school, and kids who wanted to could wear their costumes to afternoon classes. But only the little primary kids got very excited about that. The real fun of Halloween, trick-or-treating, and being allowed to tear around out of doors late at night was absolutely out. At least that's what all the parents in the neighborhood were saying all month long. Unless, of course, the murderer had been caught by then. But as day after day went by with nothing new in the papers, there seemed to be little hope of that. And then, with only 3 more days to go, suddenly there was good news. At a PTA meeting at Wilson School, a couple of really red mothers stood up and volunteered their husbands to take large groups of trick-or-treaters around the neighborhood. Before long, some other fathers got shamed or nagged into doing the same thing. And by the day before Halloween, nearly all the kids at Wilson were signed up to go around trick-or-treating with some large chaperoned group. Mr. Barkley and Mr. Kamada were going to be the chaperones for all the kids who lived in Casa Rosada and the rest of the 800 block of Orchard Avenue. Mr. Barkley was the father of some 6-year-old twins who lived on the first floor of Casa Rosada, and Mr. Kamada was from Kamada's Realty, just across the street, and the father of Ken Kamada, who was in April and Melanie's class at Wilson. April had figured out that there was at least 25 kids who would be going with Mr. Barkley and Mr. Kamada. And that was a lot of kids to keep track of, particularly in the dark, which opened the way for a fascinating and frightening scheme. If, April decided, the Egypt gang all stayed together, there might be a chance to slip away from the big group to pay a visit to Egypt. Their flashlights and jack-o'-lanterns would be enough to light up the storage yard, at least a little. And it would be really terrific. A nighttime ceremony in the spooky, half-lit, and with everybody wearing their new Egyptian costumes. They'd only stay for a few minutes, and then they'd get back to trick-or-treaters before they were missed. When April first told Melanie about her plan, Melanie thought it was just about the most exciting idea she had ever heard. She agreed to everything, even to not telling Elizabeth until Halloween night, so that she wouldn't have too long to worry about it. Elizabeth had had a tendency to worry about things like not having permission. She might not understand that it was not at all like being downright disobedient. As April pointed out, no one had forbidden them to visit Egypt on Halloween night. Melanie just didn't mention that maybe that was because nobody knew about Egypt. But April just grinned and said, "Yeah, I know. Lucky, isn't it?" Later, when Melanie began to think about it in private, she began to have some doubts. Even though the Egypt gang had decided that Professor was innocent, what if they just might be wrong? Or what if the professor was innocent, but somebody else who wasn't really did live right in the neighborhood, as so many people seem to think? And in that case, a trip to Egypt might be a lot worse than downright disobedient. It might be deadly dangerous. Downright disobedient and deadly dangerous? The two phases seemed to get stuck in Melanie's head. The night before Halloween, she woke up several times with those 4 words throbbing through her thoughts. By morning, she decided to tell April that she had changed her mind. But the next day, Melanie had an early morning piano lesson, so there was no time to talk to April before school. And at school, there was always too many people around. Even though Melanie tried all day to find an opportunity, she still hadn't told April about her decision when the time came to get into their costumes. April had been keeping all the costumes in a box in her closet, and it had been decided they would all get ready at her place. On the way up, Melanie and Marshall met Elizabeth in the hall. Melanie had been almost hoping that Elizabeth would have her two sisters along. That would have put an end to the Egypt questions without her having to say anything. But no such luck. Elizabeth explained that her little sisters were staying home because they were afraid of the dark and of all the big kids in their costumes. When they reached April's apartment, Mrs. Hall met them at the door. Come in, she said. April's all dressed and ready. She's in her room. April looked great. She was wearing her Egyptian headdress, and under her sheer jeweled robe, she had on a short tunic made up of a pillowcase. And around the bottom of the pillowcase, there were Egyptian-looking decorations done in red and black crayon. But best of all were her face and hair. For once, her false eyelashes were on straight, and she had a heavy black eye makeup that made her eyes look long and mysterious. But most surprising was her hair. It was cut short in a sort of Cleopatra bob. Caroline helped me with my face and hair, April said, and she looked at Caroline and smiled. It occurred to Melanie that it was the first time that she'd ever seen April smile at her grandmother. It also occurred to her that April wasn't going to be able to wear an upsweep anymore, but she didn't say anything about that. Instead, she only said, Your hair looks terrific, April. You ought to wear it that way all the time. Mrs. Hall reminded them that they better hurry up so they wouldn't keep the other trick-or-treaters waiting, and then she went out and left them alone. April shut the door of her room behind her grandmother, and then she turned around very slowly and dramatically to face the rest of the Egyptian gang. One look at her face, and Melanie had a strong feeling that downright disobedient and even deadly dangerous weren't going to be enough. She felt herself slipping before she was even sure of the direction in which they were moving. April put her arms down stiffly along her sides, and with her eyes closed, she tilted her Egyptian face upward rapidly. To Melanie, she looked like a miniature moth, glowing with mystery. We have received a message, April whispered, with her eyes still closed. We are summoned by the mighty ones of Egypt. The mighty ones? Elizabeth's voice quavered a little. April snapped back to life and snatched up something from her dresser. It was a little velvet pincushion box that she kept special things on. It's in here, she said, holding the box out dramatically until they'd all gathered around. The summons was from Set and Iris, Melanie said. It was a statement of a question. The summons was from Set and Iris, Melanie said. It was a statement instead of a question. And with that last lingering dismay, she realized that she was already using her high priestess voice. April nodded, and her eyes flicked across Melanie's in a way that they always did when their imaginations were in tune. The gods of Egypt struggled with the gods of consciousness, and Egypt won. The mighty ones have summoned us, Melanie chanted, and dropped to her knees. Following Melanie's lead, April was on her knees almost as quickly, and Elizabeth and Marshall weren't far behind. Slowly and with drama, April opened the box. There, on the cushion of paper handkerchiefs, was a single shiny feather. Just a few minutes ago, April whispered, I heard something, a strange sound, outside my window. I'd been expecting something. I had a weird feeling all day long. Hadn't you? They all nodded, and Melanie didn't even remember what kind of feeling she'd really been having all day. So I ran to the window, and I threw it open, and there it was, right on the seal, a token from the mighty ones. Evil Set and the beautiful Iris have sent us a token, Melanie chanted. She nudged Elizabeth with her elbow and whispered, You say the mighty ones have summoned us to their temple? Yes, the mighty ones have summoned us to their temple. Elizabeth imitated Melanie's singing chant. April poked Marshall. You say we have received your summons, O mighty ones? We have received your summons, O mighty ones, Marshall chanted, and then ad-libbed, and it is nothing but an old pigeon feather. He scanned the girls' faces expectantly, but they chose to ignore him. While they were getting on their costumes, Elizabeth asked a few worried questions about what they were going to do, but April only said, I don't know. We'll have to stick close together and look for a sign. What sort of sign? Elizabeth wanted to know. A secret omen, Melanie said. Will it be a pigeon feather? Marshall asked. We don't know what it'll be, April told him, but we'll know when it happens. She clasped her hands and struck a wonder and amazed pose. The very air will smell of mystery, she breathed. Marshall sniffed thoughtfully as April got him into his crown and robe and tried to make his baby round eyes look long and mysterious with eyebrow pencil. She was more successful with Elizabeth than Melanie's eyes. They both had beautiful eyes anyway. Elizabeth's were exotic, long and tilted, and Melanie's were luxurious, velvet and ivory, fringed with black silk. With Egyptian makeup, they both looked fantastic. By the time they'd gotten Elizabeth's ponytail tucked inside her Nefertiti headdress, it was almost 7. They started to rush out, but in the hallway they noticed that Marshall wasn't with him. They dashed back and found him in the closet with April's pin box. He was calm as they grabbed him out of the closet, snatched away the pin box, and scolded him across the living room to the hall door. It was just smelling the mystery, like April said, he was explaining patiently, when suddenly he grabbed hold of the door frame and howled, Stop! The result was a 4-way collision of Egyptians in the doorway. Marshall kept on yelling, Stop! And Elizabeth yelled, Ouch, because somebody stepped on her. And April yelled, What the? But Melanie knew right away what the matter was. She ran back into the bedroom and got security from where he'd been left on April's bed. And at last, the Egyptians were on their way.